Before everyone knew it, the beloved fourth generation of video gaming was coming to a close. 1994 was the beginning of the end of the 16-bit era, as well as the start of the 3D era. In Japan, the rest of the world had to wait a year. 1994 also marked one of the strongest years in video gaming. Developers were going all out and making some of the most critically acclaimed games ever made. Super Metroid, Tekken, Final Fantasy VI, or 3 if you want to be old school. Some games broke new ground with revolutionary technology, such as Donkey Kong Country's pre-rendered design, and Killer Instinct being the first arcade game to have an internal hard disk drive, allowing it to carry more data and have better detailed graphics. Many people remember the look of the fourth generation for its clunky and primitive sprite animation, but down the road, it proved how bulky and expandable it was. The Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo were pushed to their limits that we didn't know they were capable of. Vector Man and Super Mario RPG blew everyone's minds. Further games would utilize 3D graphics, and without optical media like in the Sega CD. You can do this on a 16-bit console. That is impressive. I'm not just talking about graphics, mind you, but how innovative these people were in bringing the 16-bit consoles to their full potential, and ending the fourth generation with such gusto. Just because we're moving up to the next step in evolution, that doesn't mean we shouldn't bother to see how far we can take current hardware. As you'd expect, Sonic the Hedgehog took part in that as well. After finishing Sonic 2, the Sega Technical Institute in the United States went straight into production of 2 new installments. Yuji Naka negotiated with Sega to work mainly with the Japanese members of STI, in order to avoid conflict with differing work customs. Given time, Sega agreed, and granted him the authority as producer of the sequel. The American members of STI would work on the spin-off, Sonic Spinball. Sonic Team veteran Hirokazu Yasuhara took the liberty as director and lead programmer of the game. To my knowledge, key Sonic creator Naoto Oshima was not involved in the development of the sequel, and that's a shame. Wouldn't it have been so cool if the trio who led the development of the original title went their separate ways and then finally reunited for this game, which is the grand finale of the classic era? I mean, things would have gone full circle. Oh well, even though they were split, Naka and Yasuhara did have a ton of respect for Oshima. If you input his birthday in the sound test in Sonic 2, you'll unlock Super Sonic, and if that doesn't say respect, I don't know what does. Development for this game was the first for a few certain people who stuck by the franchise afterwards. Artist Chris Sen will later be involved in the cancelled Sonic Extreme. Composer Howard Drossen will score the 1996 album Virtual Sonic. Lead guitarist of the band Crush 40, Jun Sonoe, contributed as sound designer. And lastly, the current head of Sonic Team, Takashi Iizuka, worked under Yasuhara as senior game designer. The sequel was planned to be Sega's most ambitious game of its time. They aimed to put a much larger focus on the story as a way to expand on the world of this franchise, in order to, and I quote, make the project huge. Originally, Naka wanted it to be an isometric pre-rendered game that would utilize the SH1 chip produced by Hitachi, as a way of combating Nintendo's Super FX chip. Sega informed Naka that such a title wouldn't be ready by the deadline, prompting STI to make another 2D game. And besides, the isometric pre-render thing would stray a bit too far. We'll see in a future episode. While they didn't roll with the pre-rendered look, 3D models were worked into the game to make it look like a bigger deal. The sequel was also planned to be twice as long as Sonic 2, but due to time constraints, they had to split the game into 2 halves as separate installments. But for most people, they're one solid game.
Has it got huge new zones? Yeah! Twice as big as Sonic 2? Yeah! Has it got the new 3D special stage? Yeah! And the new game save feature? Yeah! Do it!
New Sonic 3 is now available at a store near you.
Sega!
New Sonic 3 game cartridge and Sega Genesis sold separately.
On February, we've come to the highly acclaimed Sonic the Hedgehog 3. The second half, Sonic & Knuckles, was released in the fall of the same year. That cartridge featured lock-on technology that Sonic 3 could be inserted into to give you the full package, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles. Brilliant! This game was hyped like no other. A McDonald's toy line, a tie-in with Lifesavers and SpaghettiOs. Sega of UK contacted the British band Right Said Fred to write a song to promote Sonic 3's European release, Wonder Man, and I can't stop bobbing my head to it. As for the promotion of Sonic and Knuckles, MTV hosted a half-hour-long promo where kids would compete against each other for a cash prize in Alcatraz. Yes, the 90s was stupid, and I wouldn't change it for the world. This promo also had behind-the-scenes interviews with members of STI. How many games had interviews with the development team on TV back then? It's obvious that Sega had the highest hopes for this game, and they knew it would be a success. It's in every Best Sonic Game countdown, it's among my top 4 favorite Sonic games, and for many, it's their all-time favorite. Okay, how does this gargantuan title hold up after over 23 years? Let's dive in and see. After Sonic and Dr. Eggman's battle aboard the Death Egg, the malfunctioned space station crash-landed onto the mystical floating island, Angel Island. The Death Egg's massive weight forced the island onto the ocean surface below. The lone guardian of Angel Island's sacred gem looks in horror of the Death Egg, as he recalls the island's prophecy. In the Japanese manual of Sonic 3, the Guardian says to himself, "Does that huge egg belong to the legendary dragon?" Days have passed. During that time, Sonic and Eggman fought to determine Little Planet's destiny, and Tails invented a dual radar used to detect energy from the Chaos Emeralds. It's likely that Tails kept all the Chaos Emeralds that were gathered in Sonic 2 in order to complete it, which would explain why they were absent in Sonic CD. After the events of CD, Tails reads a strong energy spike coming from Angel Island. Meanwhile, as Sonic relaxes on the beach, an old ring washes up on the shore. He picks it up and reads the ancient text carved on it that reminds him of an old legend. In an ancient time, the Mystery Island was part of the main continent. A people with an extraordinary culture inhabited it. That civilization had built a peaceful and happy society using the energy of something they called the Mighty Stone. But at a certain point, a faction of dark-minded elders tried to steal the energy of the stone, and by accident, made that energy explode. The civilization was wiped out in a second, erased from history. Time passed, and a god descended from the sky to the newly created Mystery Island. The Sky God restored part of the civilization to the island, and threw the mighty stone into the open sky. Similar to Westside Island, Angel Island's sacred power was being abused, but instead of just having it sealed into the island, a god resorted to lifting a fraction of the earth that held the mighty stone up to the clouds. Yeah, we know well enough what the Chaos Emeralds are capable of, but if a god had to make an island ascend to the sky, this implies that the mighty stone can surpass even the Chaos Emeralds. Knowing this, Sonic can't help but feel excited to check it out. Tails tells Sonic about the energy spike, and the two hop on board Sonic's biplane, the Tornado, and set off to investigate Angel Island, with all 7 Chaos Emeralds in hand. Elsewhere, after researching everything about Angel Island, Eggman arrives there and meets its guardian. He lies to the guardian, saying that he came to Angel Island to study the giant egg, and that Sonic is a criminal who is exploiting the Chaos Emeralds and intends to steal the mighty stone. Believing this without question, the Guardian waits for Sonic's arrival. As Sonic and Tails reach Angel Island, the main hero uses the emeralds to go supersonic right away. Seconds later, he has the Super Saiyan knocked out of him by the island's Guardian, who immediately grabs all the Chaos Emeralds, laughs at the duo, and runs off. Well, that's a bummer. As soon as the lead duo begin their next journey, they're involuntarily introduced to this game's secondary antagonist, and my favorite Sonic character, Knuckles the Echidna, the guardian of the Mighty Stone. Knuckles is an introverted lone wolf with a strong sense of honor, who has been tasked with protecting the island's sacred gem. Many criticize Knuckles for being a hopeless buffoon for being deceived by Eggman, but look at this in context. He spent his whole life in solitude, so he's admittedly gullible, kind of like Goku when he was a kid.
Are you a friend of Bulma's?
Yeah, that's it.
As a matter of fact, we have fancy dinner engagements, but the reservations are only for 2. So...
Gosh, I think he was lying.
You're a regular Einstein. See ya!
And keep in mind, nothing mattered more to him than his obligation as a guardian. He attacked Sonic because he thought it was the right thing to do. And it doesn't help that the Chaos Emeralds have a history of being misused by avaricious people. Him being a rival for Sonic makes things a little more complex. He's Sonic's opponent, but he's not evil, just misunderstood. He's also the first anthropomorphic character for Sonic to fight instead of a robot or a scientist who uses machinery. Knuckles is like the Green Power Ranger in a way, a foe with just about the same abilities as the hero who gives the impression that he's always one step ahead. Some of you may be wondering how Knuckles was able to negate Sonic's super status. I have a theory, but we'll get to that later. With Knuckles distracted by Sonic and Tails, Eggman is free to study the giant egg, working to get his space station up and running again, and you'll have to venture through Angel Island with Knuckles impeding your progress to stop him. So it's a race against time. Now that everything's set, the adventure begins.